The phone vibrated on the polished wooden table, an ordinary sound carrying extraordinary weight. Prince Harry glanced down, expecting a routine message. Instead, the screen revealed a photograph. Mist curling across the Balmoral grounds at dusk, the castle silhouette softened in shadow. And there he was, young Prince Louis, standing alone on the lawn, hands at his sides, utterly unguarded. No watchful eye, no security perimeter, nothing but fog and ancient stone. Harry's heart froze. The angle was unmistakable, taken from a restricted surveillance corridor, one that only a handful of veteran officers could access. This was not a lapse. This was a deliberate, impossible decision. A breach, subtle but profound, delivered in silence across an ocean. Questions collided in his mind. Why had someone risked protocol to send this image? Was it warning? Was it manipulation? Or was it a glimpse of something far darker? The light outside his window faded, but the chill inside remained, a reminder that distance had never dulled instinct. In that single frame, decades of duty, loyalty, and family tension condensed into one fragile, dangerous moment. And as Harry zoomed closer, the shadow near the tree revealed a presence that changed everything he thought he knew about protection, trust, and the unseen threats within the palace walls. The phone vibrated on the polished wooden table. Quiet, precise, almost ceremonial in its interruption. Prince Harry glanced down, expecting a routine note from a friend or a reminder about logistics. But this was neither. The screen displayed a photograph, its light muted against the fading Californian dusk. Mist rolled across Balmoral's sprawling grounds. The castle loomed in the background, softened into shadow, its spires and battlements mere silhouettes against a sky that had begun to bleed gray. And there, framed in the open lawn like a figure in a portrait, stood young Prince Louis, alone, hands at his sides, coat buttoned high, his small form dwarfed by the expanse of heather and stone. Harry's chest tightened. It wasn't Louis's solitude that alarmed him. It was a perspective. The image had been taken from a restricted surveillance corridor, a strip of land accessible only to a handful of long-serving officers, an area where every angle, every step, and every shadow was controlled, catalogued, and observed. No outsider, no visitor, no casual eye could ever capture the scene. He zoomed in. Mist clung to the child's legs, curling around boots, hugging the grass like a cloak. And then he saw it. Faint, almost imperceptible, a dark vertical line among the trees behind Louis. Stationary. Human height. Watching. The message that accompanied the image was as simple as it was chilling. Corridor Delta 3. 60 seconds extended. Not logged in public schedule. 60 seconds. A sliver of time. Insignificant to anyone else. But Harry knew exactly what that meant. It meant a lapse in perimeter coverage. A moment when the estate's layered security, decades in the making, unbroken in principle, had been deliberately stretched. Someone had chosen to alter choreography. Someone had chosen to expose a child heir, even briefly, beyond the protective lattice designed for him. The wind outside carried the scent of salt and eucalyptus. The Pacific moved in deliberate rhythms, unperturbed by human urgency. Inside, however, something colder shifted. Exile versus duty. Father versus brother. Privacy versus protection. Harry recalled the rhythm of his own childhood. The careful choreography of walks and photographs, rehearsed gestures and postures, each movement designed to convey strength, composure, and continuity to a watching world. But even in those days, he had never been left unguarded during a shift change, never exposed to the briefest window of vulnerability. He returned to the shadow in the tree lean. Its presence was subtle, almost indistinct, but instinct screamed, deliberate observation. Someone had used the mist and distance as camouflage. Someone had chosen to watch Louis for a fleeting but meaningful moment. Another message arrived. Shadow appeared 17 seconds after primary escort cleared perimeter arc. Not scheduled. 17 seconds. Enough to test instincts. Enough to make a father, even an absent one, tremble in silent horror. Harry's jaw clenched. That was not oversight. That was risk. Intentional, calculated, controlled. He typed cautiously. Was perimeter compromised? The reply took minutes, but when it came, it was precise. No confirmed breach, but extension not authorized by primary command. Harry's pulse tightened. Unauthorized extension meant someone had altered the standard protocol. Someone had deliberately allowed a window that should never have existed. The Crown's machinery did not act impulsively. It acted with deliberation. And yet here was a fracture. Subtle, dangerous, invisible to all but those trained to see it. He moved to the window, the California evening soft and indifferent beyond the glass. In his reflection, he saw not the public persona, not the curated distance, but a man whose instincts had never left him. The instincts forged on British soil, beneath ancient battlements, beside children who had once been his responsibility, even if temporarily. Harry considered the veteran guard who had sent the image. 28 years in Royal Protection Command. Reputation forged in silence, in shadows, in decades of disciplined watchfulness. This man had broken protocol. Deliberately. And for what? To warn him? To manipulate him? Or to signal that the machinery of protection was failing, if only momentarily. From within, he returned the photograph, scanning every pixel. Lewis's posture was calm, controlled, not frightened, not tense, but still, almost rehearsed. A child who could not yet fully understand exposure, and yet placed in a frame meant to convey strength, resilience, continuity. Harry remembered being photographed at that age, walking through gardens and corridors under the careful eyes of protection officers. Every step measured, every angle calculated, every image designed to convey confidence to a world that watched closely. But he had never been alone during rotational shifts. Never. Another message, final for now. I do not believe this was malicious, but it was deliberate. Not conspiracy, not chaos. Deliberate. The word carried more weight than any panic could. Deliberate meant intent. Deliberate meant moral calculation. Deliberate meant someone had assessed risk and chosen to expose vulnerability. Perhaps for duty, perhaps for warning, perhaps for reasons Harry could not yet see. He locked the phone. The Pacific outside continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside, the weight of 60 seconds stretched long and cold across continents. Within that narrow window, a fracture had appeared, invisible to all but the watchful, and had been sent directly to him, bypassing the layers of command, the hierarchy of loyalty, the protocols of silence. Harry thought again of the shadow in the mist. Not tree, not rock, human height, stationary, watching. The veteran officer who had taken the photograph had not been warning him about loneliness. He had been warning him about presence, access, observation, a fracture in the protective lattice itself. And in that moment, Harry realized, distance does not diminish instinct. Blood does not abandon obligation. Duty does not vanish even when exile does. He pressed his hands to the cool glass, staring out the horizon, at the endless Pacific that seemed indifferent to the anxieties of a man whose past and present were inextricably bound. Somewhere across the ocean, the mist of Balmoral was swallowing a child and a secret alike, waiting for the consequences of a decision that should never have existed. As Harry isolates the shadow in the tree line, calculating distances, angles, and potential risk, he understands the truth. This is no longer about symbolism or public perception or staged imagery. Someone inside palace walls authorized a window that should never have existed. And what lies beyond that window will challenge everything Harry thought he knew about duty, trust, and the unseen guardians of a royal heir. The mist of Balmoral had thickened into night. The estate's spires barely distinguishable against the darkened sky. Within the stone walls, corridors of quiet authority stretched endlessly. Offices, guardrooms, monitoring hubs, all humming with mechanical precision. Every motion here was calculated, every shadow accounted for. And yet, in one corner of the estate, a fracture had appeared. Prince Harry's concern was no longer abstract. He knew the veteran guard who had sent the image. 28 years of Royal Protection Command. A man whose loyalty was beyond question, whose moral calculus was as rigid as the castle stones themselves. The decision to bypass formal channels and send the photograph directly to Harry was unprecedented. It was subtle, silent, and yet screaming in its implications. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the security apparatus responded in its own rhythm. Perimeter teams had rotated, Night watches were assigned in staggered sequences, and child protection protocols for the air had been layered with redundancy. Surveillance cameras, each linked to encrypted internal feeds, recorded everything, but only for authorized eyes. Communication lines were divided. Ceremonial channels for official updates, operational channels for internal reporting, and the deepest layer reserved for encrypted transfers to Royal Protection Command. Each line had rules. Each line had moral weight. Each line had expectation. The guard who sent the image knew all of this. And in sending it to Harry, he had made a decision that carried professional risk, institutional risk, and moral weight. Within Balmoral's internal monitoring hub, screens flickered. Each display showed overlapping fields, driveways, gardens, corridors, and the vast lawn where Lewis had been photographed. The timestamp of the image corresponded precisely to a rotational shift. Primary and secondary perimeter teams had cleared their zones, leaving a temporary gap, one that, according to protocol, should have lasted no longer than 45 seconds. But in this instance, the window had been extended to 60 seconds. A breach? Not technically. An oversight? Perhaps. Deliberate? Undeniably. The guard reviewed the CCTV logs. Footage from Corridor Delta 3. The corridor from which the photograph had been taken displayed a sudden black segment, 47 seconds missing entirely. Not corrupted. Not malfunctioning. Erased. An internal deletion. Executed with precision. No alarm sounded. No immediate report. Only a note in the officer's log. Internal anomaly flagged. Further review required. This was not chaos. This was controlled silence. Inside the castle, subtler signs emerged. Lewis's walk schedule had been altered subtly that day, a slight shift in timing designed to recalibrate optics. Memorandums labeled controlled optics had been circulated among senior advisors, each stamped with classified security markings. No one outside the inner circle could access these. Even within the Royal Protection Command, only a handful knew the purpose: to project a calculated image of the air while maintaining invisible safety measures. Yet the guard's decision to send the photograph to Harry disrupted the chain. This was not simply about optics. It was about trust. Protocol. The implicit understanding that certain decisions, certain risks, were to be managed internally, that outsiders, even exiled family, were not to intervene in operational judgment. Hours passed. Internal reviews began in muted fashion. The guard pored over rotation charts, perimeter coverage logs, and encrypted communication threads. Each document reinforced a troubling pattern. The 60-second extension was not authorized by primary command. A recalibration meant for public confidence had been manipulated, and by someone operating at a level above his clearance, or at least outside the expected chain of responsibility. The perimeter logs offered little clarity. Shift timings appeared regular. Patrol counts were accurate. But the missing 47 seconds of CCTV footage could not be ignored. That gap alone transformed concern into confrontation. Who had altered it? For what purpose? And why leave a single, experienced officer to witness it alone? Inside the command hub, the guard's hand rested on a stack of sealed memorandums, directives, advisories, notes on air resilience imagery. Each paper described moments engineered to demonstrate composure, strength, and poise. Every image, every timed walk, every symbolic tableau was crafted with mathematical precision. Yet for all its orchestration, something had slipped. Not the child, not the security, but the control of the narrative itself. The guard paused, tracing the corridor where the photograph had been taken. The mist in the image mirrored the haze of moral ambiguity settling over the castle. He had spent decades enforcing discipline, ensuring hierarchy and maintaining secrecy. Now, that secrecy had been breached not by malice, but by deviation, by judgment exercised beyond prescribed authority. He reviewed the logs once more, the missing footage, the altered walk schedule, the memorandums referencing optics, patterns that should have been invisible now aligned into something tangible, a silent fracture within a structure designed to prevent exactly this. By the time Prince Harry read the photograph, the estate had already begun its quiet investigation. Teams adjusted rotations discreetly. Internal communications were checked, rechecked, and logged. No alarms, no public statement, no scandal. Only the subtle mechanical rhythm of protocol responding to anomaly. But inside that rhythm, tension coiled. Every officer knew the stakes. A child heir's safety was paramount. Yet the human factor, judgment, loyalty, instinct, introduced uncertainty into even the most precise systems. The guard's mind returned to the photograph. Lewis, alone on the lawn, mist curling around him, and behind him, shadow, presence, human height, watching. It was not negligence. It was subtle, controlled risk, a momentary window engineered or exploited, and observed by a man who had made a decision that would ripple through protocol, family, and institution alike. Internal review meetings commenced. Analysts cross-referenced logs, memorandums, and rotation charts. Each note revealed nothing catastrophic, yet everything consequential. The system had functioned perfectly until human judgment intervened. And that intervention, deliberate, ethical, cautious, but outside prescribed authority, had sent ripples beyond the castle walls. By nightfall, the estate had returned to its usual rhythm. Guards patrolled silently. Cameras rotated. The heir's bedroom remained unbreached, the nursery lights dimmed, the corridors silent except for footfalls rehearsed over decades. Yet the photograph lingered, a signal that even the most disciplined institution could be altered by one decision, one calculation, one act of moral courage or deviation. And across the ocean, Harry understood this clearly. It was no longer about symbolism, optics, or staged imagery. It was about the fragile lattice of protection, the invisible structure of loyalty, and the human element that, even under strict protocol, could redefine the rules. In the quiet of his Californian home, he traced the shadow again. Not tree, not stone. Human height, watching, waiting. Someone inside palace walls had broken protocol, not maliciously, not recklessly, but deliberately. And what they were signaling, intentionally or otherwise, was a truth that could not be ignored. The question now was simple and terrifying. Who had the authority and the intent to stretch a window that should never have existed? When a guard reviews the internal CCTV logs and discovers the missing 47 seconds, the breach transforms from concern into confrontation. What was once a subtle anomaly now demands answers, and the quiet walls of Balmoral conceal both the truth and those willing to manipulate it. The Pacific light outside Harry's window had long faded, leaving the room dim and quiet. Yet the photograph of Lewis, alone on Balmoral's misted lawn, remained illuminated on his phone. The shadow behind the child lingered in Harry's mind, its implication growing heavier with every heartbeat. He could no longer observe from afar. Action, discreet, precise, and delicate, was required. Contact with palace intermediaries began. Carefully, through encrypted channels, private lines, and trusted advisors, Harry reached out. Each message was measured. Neither accusation nor panic, only inquiry. The replies were taught with protocol. Lewis had never been in danger, William insisted. Primary command confirmed perimeter integrity. Yet something in Harry's instincts refused to settle. He had learned long ago that what appeared safe on paper could hide fracture in practice. Weeks of restraint, silence, and procedure collided in the private lines between the brothers. Prince William's voice, firm and clipped, resonated with authority. Our protocols are clear. Lewis was supervised. There was no threat. Harry's tone, restrained but insistent, carried undercurrents of outrage and worry. Supervised according to protocol, yes, but the image shows him alone, and a shadow appears in the treeline. Someone watching. Do you not see the risk in extending that window? The conversation was not just procedural. It was moral. The brothers spoke across a chasm of history, shared childhoods, public expectations, and the tension of divided responsibility. Every word carried unspoken grievances, the weight of public scrutiny, the pull of personal loyalty, the residue of exile versus duty. William explained the rationale behind what the internal documents called a visibility recalibration. The 60-second unsupervised interval was intentional, designed to demonstrate calm and poise in a young heir, optics engineered to instill public confidence. Lewis, the child, had become an instrument in a broader tableau. Harry absorbed this explanation, but the moral fracture remained. You expose a child to optics, yes, But to extend a gap beyond protocol, even slightly, without alerting internal command, that is not caution. That is calculated risk. William's tone shifted, subtle but firm. Do not mistake protocol for negligence. The estate operates under layers of redundancy. Every field is monitored. Every path, every shadow, every window. Lewis was never in real danger. Yet Harry's doubt lingered. He understood redundancy, rotations, layer protection. He had lived within that system. But no system was infallible. Not when human judgment, loyalty, and instinct intervened. An instinct had spoken in the photograph. 60 seconds unsupervised, a shadow, a deliberate message sent across an ocean to him. The conversation paused, both sides weighing the tension. Harry considered the guard who had broken protocol, whose decision to send the photograph was neither reckless nor ordinary. It was deliberate, measured, ethical, perhaps, but outside expected command. That act, more than optics, more than procedure, revealed fracture within the institution itself. Midway through the chapter, further revelations emerged. Internal logs confirmed that the 60-second walk had been precisely timed down to the second. Every rotation, every surveillance feed had been aligned, except for the deliberate gap created by someone's judgment. The recalibration of visibility was intentional, yes, but the extension was not authorized by William, nor by primary command. Harry's realization sharpened. The walk, the photograph, the shadow, all was orchestrated for observation. But observation had become intrusion. Safety had become optics. And someone inside had taken liberties with both. The brothers' dialogue continued, punctuated by silence. Words became measured, weighted not just with protocol but with history. Harry pressed on. A child heir cannot be used as a symbol when risk exceeds calculation. You must see that. Someone altered the schedule. Someone created a window that should not exist. William's rebuttal was precise, almost rehearsed. We cannot prevent every anomaly. What matters is outcomes. Lewis remained safe. That is the standard. Harry felt the moral tension rise. Safety versus symbolism. Duty versus legacy. The institutional confidence William championed collided with the instinctual protection Harry felt as a father, as a brother, and as a man removed from command yet attuned to threat. The discussion deepened. The brothers explored the nature of loyalty, discretion, and ethical judgment within the Royal Protection Command. They revisited past moments. Childhood walks along palace corridors, rehearsed photographs designed to project calm, moments of exposure balanced against inherited responsibility. Memory and morality intertwined. By the chapter's emotional midpoint, the fracture was clear. Harry could no longer see this as a procedural issue. The photograph, the shadow, the deliberate unsupervised interval. They were all evidence of human intervention in a system that valued hierarchy and discretion above all else. The climax of this chapter arrived with Harry's demand. The original security file, unaltered and complete. His insistence was not bureaucratic. It was ethical, personal, and urgent. The response arrived with delay, wrapped in encrypted layers. The file had already been archived under restricted sovereign clearance. Not accessible, not explained, not questioned. For Harry, this was the moral crux. A child had been exposed, a protocol circumvented, and a veteran officer had acted beyond authority. All without transparency. The weight of secrecy, loyalty, and familial duty pressed heavily against him. As the brothers' dialogue concluded for the evening, silence descended. The mist of Balmoral now imagined across an ocean, the photograph hovering in Harry's mind, the shadow lingering at the tree-line. All of it became emblematic of a deeper conflict, not between child and institution, not between visibility and safety, but between two brothers divided by duty, perspective, and invisible pressures of legacy. Harry's pursuit of the original security file uncovers its restricted status, already archived under sovereign clearance. What was once a question of procedural lapse now becomes a confrontation with unseen authority. The next chapter will reveal the hidden archives beneath Balmoral and the decisions made there that shape not just perception, but legacy itself. The corridors beneath Balmoral were not meant for light. Stone walls, centuries old, absorbed sound until whispers became echoes of memory. Here, In the hidden archive chamber, the weight of history pressed down, not just in tomes and ledgers, but in the very air. Every step resonated like a cautionary heartbeat. Every flicker of candlelight or lamp shadow a reminder that some secrets were older than the people who guarded them. The veteran guard moved with deliberate care, keys jingling softly as he navigated layers of locks and access codes. The photograph Harry had received was more than a signal. It was a key, a prompt to uncover something deeper. His decades of experience told him that the incident in the misted lawn, Lewis alone, a shadow in the tree line, was not isolated. It was part of a carefully constructed pattern, woven into the machinery of royal optics. The archive was vast, shelves lined with leather-bound registers, folders stamped classified, and internal memorandums detailing decades of operational procedure. Among them, the guard located correspondence between senior advisors, discussing what they called air resilience imagery. The term was clinical, detached, but the content revealed a human calculus. Moment of controlled exposure for the young princes, crafted to demonstrate poise under pressure, resilience against global uncertainty, and calm in the face of scrutiny. One memorandum detailed a specific exercise, a 60-second unsupervised walk, intentionally recorded for archival purposes. The goal was psychological, strategic, and public-facing, not for safety, but for the perception of control. Yet a footnote revealed something alarming. The 60-second interval had been extended unexpectedly that day. The extension was not ordered by Prince William. Someone else had altered the schedule, with full awareness of the potential consequences. The guard's instincts flared. This was not an administrative error. It was deliberate intervention. Hours passed as he cross-referenced logs, memorandums, and encrypted messages. Every thread pointed to the same unsettling truth. The mechanisms of perception and protection were intertwined in ways that placed ethics, optics, and duty into a delicate, dangerous equilibrium. A lapse of even a few seconds could create exposure, not merely symbolic, but tangible. He examined the archive footage of the perimeter shifts. Every patrol rotation had been logged, every step time-stamped. Yet the missing 47 seconds, noted in previous CCTV anomalies, persisted as a void. In those 47 seconds, the young heir had been alone, under the observation of a shadowy figure. Human presence undetectable to standard protocol. The guard reflected on his own role. Decades of silent watchfulness had taught him to interpret patterns beyond the literal. A photograph, a shadow, a misaligned rotation. Each was a signal. Each carried weight. And in this instance, the signal had been sent to Harry, bypassing command, bypassing hierarchy, bypassing expectation. The archive revealed not chaos, but intent. He found letters from advisors, notes from security analysts, and confidential remarks from senior officials. Language like calculated exposure, visibility recalibration, and symbolic continuity recurred. The content was clinical, yet the implications were human. A child was used as a lens through which the monarchy projected strength. And in doing so, someone had manipulated the boundary between safety and optics without authorization. The veteran officer paused before a ledger listing extended schedules and unsanctioned adjustments. Names and timestamps lined the pages. Orders followed. Directives obeyed. But anomalies appeared, subtle, precise, and deliberate. The 60-second walk had been extended as noted. Who authorized it? Who accepted the moral responsibility? The guard's years of service told him this question could not be answered lightly. He considered the human cost. Not injury, not loss, but trust. The confidence of family. The reliability of the system. The moral architecture of protection. One photograph, sent across an ocean, had revealed vulnerabilities hidden in plain sight. And in the archive, those vulnerabilities were traced, recorded, and deliberately manipulated. Prince William, elsewhere, was already confronting the advisory council. Discussions unfolded in hushed tones, deliberating on the implications of these findings. Operational oversight, ethics of exposure, and the risk of symbolic manipulation were weighed carefully. The guard understood that within these chambers, the monarchy's moral and operational compass was being silently tested. Yet there was more. Notes buried beneath decades of correspondence revealed that the 60-second interval, extended without authorization, had created a ripple of unforeseen consequences. For a brief moment, the heir's exposure exceeded any previously sanctioned scenario. The implications were subtle but profound. A test of resilience, yes, but also a potential compromise of trust within the system. The archive became a mirror, not a failure, not of negligence, but a delicate balance between perception, loyalty, and protection. The moral tension was palpable. How far could one extend symbolic imagery without endangering the life it was meant to glorify? How much responsibility rested on human discretion when protocols were designed for predictability, not judgment? The guard walked slowly among the shelves, fingers trailing along the spines of leather-bound registries. Every document whispered decades of decisions made quietly, intentionally, and often invisibly. And yet, in this quiet, a fracture appeared. One unsupervised interval, one shadowed figure, one deliberate communication, and the balance between duty, ethics, and family trust was suddenly exposed. Hours into the investigation, the guard realized that the extension, the deviation from protocol, was not malicious, but intentional. Someone had acted without direct authorization, believing that discretion and judgment superseded procedure. And that realization was chilling. In a world constructed around hierarchy, loyalty, and visibility, a single decision could create consequences unseen, unanticipated, and morally complex. Harry would later reflect on this archive, understanding that legacy, perception, and protection were inseparable in a way that often demanded moral judgment beyond formal authority. The photograph, the shadow, the 60-second interval, they were symbols of the fragility and resilience inherent in both monarchy and family. The chamber's silence deepened. Outside, Balmoral's mist pressed against the stone walls, swallowing sound and light alike. Inside, the archive stood as witness to human judgment, ethical deviation, and the invisible mechanisms that maintain the crown. The guard, finally, closed the ledger and replaced it carefully on its shelf. The hidden addendum, the unsanctioned extension, was now known, cataloged, and morally understood. But the question lingered. If William had not ordered it, who had, and why? The extension wasn't William's doing. Someone else had altered the schedule without authorization. The next chapter will reveal how that choice reshapes not just protocol, but the responsibilities of legacy, protection, and trust, and how the weight of inheritance can collide with human error and discretion. Balmoral had returned to its quiet rhythm. The morning mist drifted over the heather, brushing the castle's stone walls with pale light. Footfalls echoed softly along corridors, not hurried, not urgent, merely precise, measured, deliberate. The estate was alive with its usual hum of observation and duty, yet beneath that calm, the weight of recent events lingered like a shadow that refused to dissipate. The internal review had concluded. Procedural oversight, not conspiracy, was the verdict. The 60-second unsupervised interval had been a miscommunication between rotational commands, a human error in a system designed to prevent error. The moral implications, however, remained indelible. Trust, loyalty, and perception, each had been tested, stretched, and observed. Prince William had taken swift, decisive action. Child protection protocols were tightened, rotational redundancies reinforced, and advisory boards restructured quietly to prevent recurrence. The monarchy's machinery moved silently, restoring order not with fanfare, but with discreet efficiency. The estate's rhythm absorbed the corrections, and the subtle tension began to release. The guard who had sent the photograph was neither punished nor publicly acknowledged. His service remained respected. He was reassigned, preserving both dignity and hierarchy. That act alone underscored the delicate balance between recognition and discretion, an unspoken acknowledgement that loyalty often required invisible courage. Prince Harry requested a private meeting. Behind closed doors, the brothers spoke, not in confrontation, but in restrained candor. Words were chosen with care, pauses deliberate, each sentence weighted with history, expectation, and shared understanding. The system worked, William said, voice calm, eyes steady. But I understand why you reacted as you did. Our responsibility is never abstract. It is immediate, personal, constant. Harry nodded, a tension slowly releasing from his shoulders. I needed to see that, not just to trust procedure, but to know that we value safety over optics. That family comes first, even when the world watches. Their exchange did not resolve all differences. It did not erase past grievances or the invisible distance wrought by years of separation, but established a quiet acknowledgement. Legacy must never outweigh safety. Duty must never overshadow moral judgment. Elsewhere in the estate, Lewis walked once more across the misted lawns. This time, the boy was flanked by watchful distance. Guards, strategically positioned, maintained a silent vigilance. Cameras rotated, rotation staggered. Every measure reflected lessons learned, recalibrations made, and human judgment tempered with renewed caution. The photograph that had begun this crisis, misted, solitary, shadowed, became a symbol not of fear, but the delicate architecture of protection. Harry watched from afar, understanding that guardianship, loyalty, and inheritance are often invisible, measured not in public display, but in quiet, disciplined vigilance. Even within the corrective measures, subtle lessons persisted. Every protocol reinforced, every chain of command clarified, every human judgment scrutinized. Each became part of an ongoing moral ledger. The monarchy's survival depended not on public display, but on silent correction, swift adaptation, and humility to recognize human limitation. By evening, Balmoral exhaled its mist into the twilight. The estate had resumed its rhythm, yet its stones, corridors, and guards bore witness to the events that had unfolded. Lessons were learned, protocols adjusted, but the fragility of legacy remained palpable. Safety had prevailed, yet the memory of exposure lingered, a reminder that vigilance never truly sleeps. For Harry and William, the private acknowledgement sufficed. Reconciliation was neither dramatic nor public. It existed in shared understanding, in a mutual recognition that legacy is a responsibility, not a prize. That protection is an act of continuous vigilance, and that love, however restrained, must guide judgment above all else. As Balmoral's mist settled and Lewis walked under watchful eyes, the story of measured correction and invisible vigilance concluded, for now. But tomorrow will reveal another quiet decision, another moral test within palace walls, where legacy and loyalty intersect in ways the public can never see. The morning mist lingered over Balmoral, softening the edges of battlements and gardens, as though the castle itself exhaled after weeks of tension. The estate appeared unchanged, timeless in its quiet dignity. Yet beneath that stillness, a lattice of vigilance pulsed quietly, unseen by the world, invisible to cameras, invisible to public scrutiny. Protection was no longer just protocol. It was a living, breathing architecture, inherited, internalized, and maintained through generations of disciplined watchers. Harry stood by the window in his Californian home, tracing the photograph again. The image of Lewis, alone on the misted lawn, remained frozen in his mind, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer a symbol of risk or breach, but the fragility and resilience of legacy. In a single frame, decades of duty, decades of loyalty, and decades of unseen labor coalesced. Every shadow, every moment of solitude, every deliberate watchful gaze was part of a system designed to preserve life, history, and institution simultaneously. Inside the castle, the watch continued. Guards patrolled the grounds with precise rhythm, their movements silent yet deliberate. Cameras rotated along programmed arcs. Rotation staggered to prevent predictable patterns. Children moved under discreet surveillance. Footsteps cataloged and shadowed without notice. Every measure, however unseen, was an act of guardianship, an invisible choreography of protection. The veteran officer who had sent the photograph returned to his duties quietly. His actions were neither praised nor punished. Discretion had been his tool. Integrity had been his guide. He moved among the corridors and gardens, blending seamlessly with the estate, a silent witness to the moral and operational lessons recently tested. Harry reflected on the subtle moral architecture revealed by the incident. Loyalty often required breaking silence to preserve safety. Protection required judgment beyond protocol. Legacy depended not only on inheritance, but on those who watched unseen, ensuring continuity in every imperceptible decision. A crown was not merely gold and ceremony. It was vigilance, restraint, and moral courage maintained in shadows. Even Lewis's steps on the dew-soaked lawn spoke to this quiet order. Flanked by unseen watchers, He moved with the natural grace of a child, unaware of the intricate lattice safeguarding his presence. Every rotation of patrol, every calculated positioning, every alert yet discreet observation reinforced a truth as old as the monarchy itself. A lineage survives not by spectacle, but by those who observe quietly, act without notice, and place duty above recognition. Across continents, Harry understood this instinctively. Exile had not diminished his awareness of duty, nor had distance weakened the lessons learned in childhood. In the photograph, he saw a reminder that protection is rarely loud, loyalty is rarely public, and sometimes preserving life and legacy requires acting in silence, trusting judgment, and shouldering the burden of unseen responsibility. The estate exhaled once more. Mist curled over the lawns, softened by early sunlight. Balmoral stood serene, majestic, and eternal. Yet beneath its stones, its corridors, and its gardens, vigilance continued. Every measure, every human judgment, every watchful gaze ensured the delicate balance between safety, legacy, and perception remained intact. Harry's reflection concluded with quiet certainty. The image of Lewis had become more than a warning. It was proof that even in absence, instinct endures. Even in distance, duty persists. And even in silence, the Crown's watchers hold the line, sustaining both life and history through unwavering vigilance. Tomorrow, another quiet decision within the palace walls will nearly alter the line of succession, proving once more that the monarchy is maintained not by spectacle, but by the invisible architecture of loyalty, judgment, and unwavering watchfulness.